Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Boulder. My name is Tom Denkenwolf, and I serve as a Covenant Group facilitator. One thing I love about this congregation is how we connect on so many levels, from the shared experience of the service, to chatting during coffee hour, to all of the smaller church activities. If you're joining us online, please fill out a visitor form in the link in the description. We'd love to connect with you. To give you some idea of what we're all about, let me tell you about our mission. We say here that we connect bravely, deepen spiritually, embody justice, and always love. What we mean is that our community is inviting you into our shared time together today, but it's also inviting you into a way of life, a way of being in the world that may transform you. We want to grow as individuals and to welcome more people into this community, and we want to help you in your personal dream to make the world and your life better. So there you go, the church in a nutshell. We have a few announcements this morning, starting with a bit of hard news from our Indigenous Justice team. On Christmas night, a 16-year-old Lakota boy, a member of the White Pipe family, was killed by gun violence, as were 3 others on Pine Ridge within a 48-hour period. We are connecting donations of money and food for the funeral and exploring a vigil at the Teepee Razors Hub in Lafayette next Saturday. Stop by the table in the Sky Room after the service to learn more and share what you can. On a less heavy note, next Sunday, our architects for the building expansion project, Scott Rodwin and his team, will be here at the service and afterwards for a meet and greet to get to know them and their values. Don't miss it. Finally, I'd like to invite Mary Fredericks up for a special announcement from the Racial Justice team.
Good morning. So I'm representing the Racial Justice Committee, and we wanted to announce something that many of you may already know, which is that on January 18th, Saturday, from 1 to 4, we've invited Reagan Bird to come and do a workshop with us, which is extraordinary. I've seen, she came here in either 2018 or 2019, I forget when, and I went to her workshop, and it was really worth joining her. She's an anti-oppression speaker and trainer. She's award-winning. And the structure of the workshop is going to begin with a reflection question, followed by a PowerPoint presentation, and there will be opportunities for breakout groups and group discussion. A few of the focus points that Reagan will be covering are what allyship looks like, what bystander intervention techniques in disrupting harm might look like, and microaggressions. Some takeaway goals for the workshop are to obtain concepts in core language. So those of you who want to use your voice for justice, this is a good way to learn a way to do it. And of course, there'll be snacks and beverages, as we always provide. So if you're interested, you can sign up at the table after the service out in the Sky Room or online. And if you have questions, speak to the person at the table outside. Thank you.
Each week, when we gather, we light our chalice, just as 1,000 other congregations do each week in this country. It is a symbol of our Unitarian Universalist past, present, and future. It is a visible reminder of our interconnection. I'd like to invite Wincia Clute to light this morning's chalice. See ya.
Oh my, look at you. Well, it is. I'd heard that was the best part. So it's sort of a story I wanted to tell, that I found I was a Unitarian Universalist before I even knew of the denomination. In about 1956, when I was 5 years old, I was at a Sunday service in the Children's Chapel in an Episcopal church in Hartford, Connecticut. I remember my feet dangling, above the floor and looking down at my white ankle socks and little patent leather shoes. I can remember, it's so clear, right? It was chilly and dark in that little chapel, and I was glad for my coat and Sunday white gloves. The minister, children's minister, stood in front of us, and he had on a black gown and a colorful stole, and he'd gotten to the part of the service where he was going to pass the plate to collect our nickels and dimes, and he explained where our money would go. Many children in Africa are suffering, he told us. There's not enough food, and many are sick, and some will die. Your money will be used to send a minister to Africa to baptize these children so that when they die, they will go to heaven and be with Jesus. I remember feeling really bad at that moment. I thought, why wouldn't the minister take food and medicine to the children so they'd be fed and taken care of? That would be much better in my child's mind than the promised blessing. Now, I knew I could get a candy bar for a nickel. I knew with food, even Necco wafers, I thought they would not have to worry about going to heaven so soon. Somehow, as a young child, I knew the worth and dignity of those faraway children was better cared for with food than a wet forehead and a prayer. Now I recognize the value behind the ritual of baptism, and that are those of loving kindness and compassion and inclusion and community. But to my child's mind, and to my mind today, it's better to care for the living beings who are in essential need of first aid and first care, water and food. 30 years later, when I had children of my own, I found a spiritual home in May Memorial Unitarian Church in Syracuse, New York. It was there that I found the spiritual principles that conformed with the values I'd had as a child. One Easter Sunday, my aunt joined me at May Memorial service, and as we left, she said, "That is the first Easter service I have ever been to when Jesus wasn't mentioned." But what was at the core of that service was the core of the service that my aunt and I attended was the rebirth that appears with the arrival of spring. It spoke to the need for respect for one another and for the care, to give care to the living world around us. Here in this congregation, we accept each other as we are, with our shared hopes and fears for a safe and healthy future for our world. And so it is with that spirit that I light the chalice today in honor of the community of all peoples of earth and the interdependence of all beings. May it be so.
Our covenant is the promise we make to each other about how we will be together in community. It is simple, it is demanding. In person and online, will you join together as one as we speak it aloud? We gather in fellowship to speak truth to each other, to reach out and touch one another, to care with each other, and to seek the truth divine. So be it.
Happy New Year. As my kids delight in telling me, I haven't seen you for a whole year. A patronizing laugh is appropriate when I say that. Oh, friends, this is a good time of year, though, for old stories and for old myths. Myths to return to because they tell, in the language of snakes and goddesses, the stories of our everyday lives. There's a Norwegian fairy tale that I return to every year. This is a good time of year for it. A Norwegian fairy tale where the hero comes to a crossroads where three roads meet in this gray and desolate plain with no landmarks, no signifiers. And standing at the center of these crossroads, our hero turns around and around, trying to see which way to go until he's forgotten which path he got there by. But each path is labeled, this being a fairy tale, with a description of what will happen to you if you travel down that road. And one is marked, he who travels down this road will return to this place unharmed. And one is marked, he who travels down this road may or may not return. And the third way is marked, he who travels here will never return. And so, of course, our hero chooses the third path. He who travels down this road will never return to this place. How else would he discover the outcome of the journey unless it led to a place and a person that he hadn't yet been? In myth, the crossroad is the in-between place where any direction is possible. It's the moment where you are unavoidably confronted with the reality that you are in the in-between. And sometimes that is a beautiful, generative place of possibilities. And sometimes that is an overwhelming, baffling place. I don't know what your crossroads is as this new year begins. In work, in health, in family, in age and life stage, in parenting, in relationship. And I also don't have the one solution to tell you which way to go. That's not really how this congregation works. What we have instead together is 1,000 stories from 100 generations of people who paused in their own crossroads, who discovered, sometimes to their surprise or horror or delight, that they did not know which way to go, and spun around until they weren't sure which way they'd even come from, and then made their choice. The travel writer Rick Steves talks about 3 different ways to take a voyage. He says, you can make a journey as a tourist or a traveler or a pilgrim. He says, most travelers I know, they're proud to be known as the traveler as opposed to the tourist. I'm more thoughtful. I'm not just here to shop and get a selfie. I'm here to immerse myself in the culture, to learn. He says, that's a traveler, to become a temporary local. But I think a pilgrim learns about themselves. And you learn about yourself by leaving your home and looking at it from a distance. That's what it is, I think, to be a part of this community, to be a part of any church pilgrim community. When you make a journey with the intention of you yourself being transformed by that journey. So come in. Come into this crossroads place. Come in to this house where you can be who you are and who you're called into becoming. Come in and take the path whose promise, which sometimes feels like a threat, is transformation. Where gods and monsters and heroes are all just us, ordinary life becoming.
Will you rise in body or in spirit and join in our opening song? Sing through my voice, play through my hands. Let the way be open. Sing through my voice, play through my hands. Let the way be open. Make up a harmony if you want. Sing through my voice, play through my hands. Let the way be open. Sing through my voice. Play through my hands. Let the way be open. One more time. Sing through my voice. Play through my hands. Let the way be open.
Join me in a spirit of prayer and meditation. What does it even mean to say that? Actually, I think it's an invitation into that same feeling as the singing. There's a quality of paying attention to your own voice, to your own intention. There's a quality, though, also of paying attention to each other, to the experience of everyone around you, whatever it is that moves between us and beyond us and through us. There's a sense of intention and intentionality, a kind of quieting down that verse by verse deepens. Our words for meditation today, for reflection, this is a poem called Voyage by Tony Hoagland. I feel as if we opened a book about great ocean voyages and found ourselves on a great ocean voyage, sailing through December and around the Horn of Christmas and into the January sea, and sailing on and on in a novel without a moral, but one in which all the characters who died in the middle chapters make the sunsets near the book's end more beautiful. And someone is spreading a map upon a table, and someone is hanging a lantern from the stern, and someone else says, "I'm only sorry that I forgot my blue parka. It's turning cold." Sunset like a burning wagon train. Sunrise like a dish of cantaloupe. Clouds like two armies clashing in the sky. Icebergs and tropical storms, that's the kind of thing that happens on our ocean voyage. And in one of the chapters, I was blinded by love. And in another, anger made us sick like swallowed glass, and I lay in my bunk and slept. For so long, I forgot about the ocean, which all the time was going by right there outside my cabin window. And the sides of the ship were green as money, and the water made a sound like memory when we sailed. And then it was summer under the constellation of the swan, under the constellation of the horse. At night, we consoled ourselves by discussing the meaning of homesickness. But there was no home to go home to. There was no getting around the ocean. We had to go on finding out the story by pushing into it. The sea was no longer a metaphor. The book was no longer a book. That was the plot. That was our marvelous punishment. We'll be together in silence for a few moments. Amen. Our commitment to connect bravely means we're called to be glad with those who rejoice and weep with those who mourn. So each week we set aside this time in the service to make visible in ritual the joys and the sorrows shaping our lives, to practice feeling our way into community like that. For those meeting in person, I invite you to come forward as you feel moved, starting with the back of the room, then the sides and the front, and silently to take a stone and place it into the earth. A stone to symbolize your joys and your cares, your sorrows, and how they take their place in a larger whole, an interior landscape made visible in community, held in the hand of something larger than any of us. Today, we place a first stone in joy when Sia wishes my husband, Larry Kinney, happy 84th birthday, Larry. For all the milestones as they pass, for all the blessings and concerns we carry, we hold this compassionate space with love. And please come forward as you feel moved.
Reconnect the part of me that knows just who I am. Reconnect the heart of me, that full of passion part of me. Reconnect the soul of me, the whole of me. Let's try it together. Reconnect the part of me that knows just who I am. Reconnect the heart of me, that full of passion part of me. Reconnect the soul of me, the whole of me. Good. Reconnect the part of me that knows just who I am. Reconnect the heart of me, that full of passion part of me. Reconnect the soul of me, the whole of me. Reconnect the part of me that knows just who I am. Reconnect the heart of me, that full of passion part of me. Reconnect the soul of me, the whole of me. One more time. Reconnect the part of me that knows just who I am. Reconnect the heart of me, that full of passion part of me. Reconnect the soul of me, the whole of me.
There is a sacredness to in-between time, when it's no longer past and not yet future, when the way ahead isn't clear. This can be a time for wondering and imagining and looking in every direction at once. And also, it can be a baffling and difficult time. It can be a challenging time. In Southeastern European myth and magical traditions, the goddess of the crossroads is Hecate, and she has 3 interconnected bodies looking in every direction at once. Her symbols were the key and the torch to open the way and illuminate it. Her animals were the dog, watcher and searcher and companion, and the snake, who sheds its skin and transforms. And these are her properties and symbols because they are the experience of the crossroads. They're the things that you need in that in-between moment, the liminal time, the frontier wilderness between this and that, between who you've been and who you're becoming. And she was the guardian then, not just of roads, but of journeys too. Journeys also between life and death, and her keys unlocked the doors behind which lived the ghosts from your past, which still shape the lives of the living. There's a holy movement in that in-between place, standing in the center of the crossroads, a generative sense of possibility, and it's a dangerous place because it's easy to get lost there. And often, the fact is that the in-between time does not feel alive with holy possibility. If you lost your job and the new one is not forthcoming, it rings a little hollow to talk about how beautiful and possible the in-between is. That crossroads of any sort of thing in your life, that crossroads, whether a new year or the space between any loss and the not yet, which hasn't quite come, it can also be a place of bewilderment and stuckness in that bewilderment. I have a book on my shelf for inspiration sometimes that I turn to in moments like this. It's not from the great poets and sages of ages past. It's a book titled How to Solve It. And it's the work of a mathematician, George Polya. I'm always curious if there are any mathematicians in the house. Any George Polya fans? For you online, there's one nod. All right. His actual contributions to mathematics, say one commentator, are too technical to be understood by non-experts. But this book he writes, called How to Solve It, is all about how do you find the answer to problems when you don't know how to find the answer to problems. His idea is that in mathematical education, at least the little bit of math that I learned, probably you too, we're learning things that have already been proven and whose answers are already known. And it's easy enough to learn something when the answer's already known. You just follow the steps that someone took to get from not knowing to knowing. It's straightforward. But it's much harder to figure out how to answer a problem no one has ever answered before. So his book, How to Solve It, is about 50% math that I do not understand whatsoever, and about 50% a series of suggestions for trying something different when you get stuck. It's like a metaphorical key ring to a locked door. That one didn't work? All right, well, try the next one, try the next one, try the next one. It's not that it's a bad thing to get stuck, he says. You're going to get stuck. In fact, part of the teacher's responsibility to the student is to allow them the experience of getting stuck and finding their way out from getting stuck. It's not always pleasant, but it's good teaching. It's going to happen. It's inevitable. And the thing that you learn is not to stay there forever. You're stumped by the problem. Polya says, well, do you know a related problem to the one you're trying to solve? Something that has some similarity or some aspect of it. He says, can you solve a part of the problem? Even if you can't do the whole thing, is there one little piece of it that you can solve? He says, can you restate the problem? Can you take this thing that looms before you, and now we're leaving mathematics and coming into our own lives. Can you take this thing and restate it in different terms, a different analogy, a different story, a different experience? He says, you're stumped. Did you use all the relevant data? Or are you so focused on this thing right here that you didn't notice there's a whole bunch of other stuff going on that you haven't really grappled with? For Polya, the art of perseverance is not about doing the same thing over and over, expecting that you're going to break through one moment or another. For him, perseverance means this sort of continual sideways motion. This didn't work? Well, what about this? What about this? What about over there? He says, he doesn't actually say this, but I'm saying it. You're cat sitting for a friend, and you show up to their house, and the door is locked. And you know the cat is hungry. You know it needs to be fed, and you can't get in. You don't just stand there knocking at the door because no one's in there, and no matter how much knocking you do, nothing is going to happen. That's not what perseverance looks like. Perseverance means you go around to the back door to see if it's unlocked. You check under the mat for a key. You ring the neighbor's doorbell. You text your friend and say, hey, your door's locked. What's going on? You ask yourself, wait a minute, is this even the right address? Am I at the right address? Is there a cat inside? Can I confirm visually? Perseverance, that is, in math and in our daily life doesn't mean doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results. That's perseveration. And that does keep you stuck. So perseveration means repeating the same word or movement or phrase over and over without there being a stimulus that would provoke that response. So a person, say, with a brain injury, repeats the same word over and over without meaning. But more generally, not in a clinical setting, perseveration is the inability to switch paths. It's an inability to shift off of the track that you're on, the thing you're doing or saying or thinking. It's you knocking at that locked door for hours or years, unable to imagine that there is any other possibility for getting in except for that. And that's not about innate moral character or grit or the will to try something else. If you're stuck in that place, this is not me saying, well, just try harder. You can induce perseveration by stressing someone out. So this group of scientists, this group of possibly very mean scientists in Portugal, ran an experiment in which they stressed out rats. They gave them mild electrical shocks. They periodically and randomly dunked them in water. They kept them in the same cage with bully rats, which are apparently a thing. And these rats then, who were subject to those conditions, would do behaviors that got a reward. They would pull the lever for a squirt of sugar water or a food pellet. And then in those conditions, they wouldn't stop doing that. Stressed rats pull the lever for the food bar even when they don't eat the food. And then inside the little rat brains, researchers could see physical differences. Cage a rat with a bully, dunk it in water, shock it without warning, and the rat's brain changes. The neurons in the part of the brain that make decisions and understand possibility shrink, and the neurons in the habit learning part of the brain get overgrown, over-reinforced. So you just stretch on this analogy. You can give George Polya's advice to these rats, assuming they could understand it, and you can tell these rats inspirational, historical stories about perseverance winning over perseveration, but unless you actually change the material conditions of their lives, the brains are not going to change. Another way to say that is that the rats couldn't think themselves into a different way of acting. They had to act themselves into a different way of thinking. The good news, after 4 unstressed weeks, the rats were okay again. Us too, maybe. And I don't really want to anthropomorphize the rats too much, give them human qualities, say they're just like us. Instead, what I want to suggest is that we ratapomorphize the humans. We're a whole lot like those rats, because in the stuck moments, our brains work like them, unable to see any possibilities but the one we've always been doing. And our capacity to perceive possibility shrinks. Our habits take hold, and we're lost in this fog, thinking that we're moving, going in circles. There's this wonderful study I read about once where they blindfolded the subjects and put them in a big field. I don't know if these scientists were Portuguese or elsewhere. And what they wanted to see is, can you walk a straight line when you have no reference to anything external whatsoever? Turns out you can't. The subjects would walk in these big circles because blindfolded, unable to see where they're going, they went around and around and around. When you're hitting that lever over and over again in your own life, whatever that looks like for you, food or sleep or sex or working harder or rage, it's like a stuckness that you can't get out of. It's like being stuck in quicksand. Quicksand, those of you who grew up in like the 50s and 60s are familiar with quicksand. A few years ago, Radiolab did a special on quicksand, and they put a graph up on their website of the number of mentions of quicksand by decade of the 20th century. And it stays pretty flat in the 20s and 30s, and then a little more in the 40s. And then all of a sudden, in the 1950s, there's this huge upsurge in quicksand mentions. Lawrence of Arabia loses his horse in quicksand. I see the nods here. Lone Ranger has a serious quicksand problem. For those of you of younger generations, quicksand is a non-Newtonian fluid, which means it doesn't quite act like a fluid and it doesn't quite act like a solid. When the stuff is sitting still, it acts like a solid. But when you shake it, when you move it, when you agitate it, it starts to behave like a liquid. If you fill your washing machine with quicksand, this is not a good idea. It would sit there like cement until you turned it on, at which point it would start to move like a liquid. So the advice for escaping quicksand, never let it be said that church isn't a source of practical advice. The advice for escaping quicksand is to move around in it. Don't stay perfectly still. The less you move, the more solid it's going to be. Don't stay still and let it harden around you. Escape a quagmire by moving around in it until you can see the way out. Don't stay still, don't sink. And I don't mean to say that with a sense that that's an easy thing to do in our own lives when we feel stuck. I think the work in that moment is not to either seductively fall into this trap that, well, I'm stuck in this in-between place, but it's inevitably going to be good. I'm fine. Or I'm stuck in this in-between place, and it's inevitably going to be bad. Oh, well. But if that threshold, if that in-between place is such a holy space that it has its own goddess, what is she inviting you to do right there at the crossroads? Sometimes the stuckness is an invitation to gentle perseverance in the moment, to keep trying small changes, not to be wholly still until you can start to see a way out. It's not bad to get stuck. It's going to happen. It's inevitable. And keep moving before the quicksand hardens all the way. Are you stumped by the problem? Well, do you know a related problem to the one that you're facing right now? Can you solve part of the problem that you're facing right now? Can you restate it in different terms, a different analogy, a different story? Did you use all the relevant data to what's going on? Do you have a friend, a mentor, a counselor who can offer fresh perspective? Myths tell in the language of goddesses and snakes and symbols the story of our everyday life. In myth, the crossroad is the in-between place where any direction is possible. And it's a moment where you're unavoidably confronted with the reality that you're in between. I don't know what that crossroad is for you right now. It's different for each of us in work, in health, in life stage or age, in parenting, in relationship. And there's not one solution. There's not one answer to that works for everybody. But what we have instead is 1,000 stories from 100 generations of people who tried different things. 100 possibilities, 100 ways to discover where you are, and then to make a choice. The invitation from the goddess of the crossroads is a torch to illuminate possibilities you can't see yet, and a key to open locked doors that have been locked so long you've forgotten they're there. The invitation from the goddess of the crossroads is animals to accompany you, a dog to remind you where you are and warn you of danger and tell you that you're not alone, and a snake to remind you that you can move in any direction, and sometimes the only way to leave the stuck place is to shed your skin and transform. Amen. You can rise in body or spirit. Let's sing together.
One of the things that we strive to do here in this community is to remind each other that those doors exist, and to take that moment for your metaphorical rat brain to decrease the stress level and remember that something else is possible. So this song is a prayer to kind of tap into that deeper wisdom, and when you don't feel it yourself, who in the community can lift you up and go with you? May my hands do the work I was sent here to do. May my ears know the truth from the lies. May my voice speak for justice. May I walk unafraid. May I see through compassionate eyes. May my hands do the work I was sent here to do. May my ears know the truth from the lies. May my voice speak for justice. May I walk unafraid. May I see through compassionate eyes. One more time. May my hands do the work I was sent here to do. May my ears know the truth from the lies. May my voice speak for justice. May I walk unafraid. May I see through compassionate eyes.
This month, our offering goes to SPAN, the Safe House Progressive Alliance for Nonviolence. I'd like to invite Mary Deneen to tell us a little more about SPAN.
Thank you, Tom. I've been a member of this church since 1997, and during that time, also a supporter, donor, and volunteer of Safe House Progressive Alliance for Nonviolence, also known as SPAN. SPAN is our local human rights organization committed to ending violence against adults, youth, and children through support, advocacy, education, and community organizing. UUCB has been a supporter of SPAN since the beginning of Share Our Plate, whenever that was. Somebody knows when that was, but not me. Over the years, SPAN has been the recipient during various months of the year. This being January, I was made aware that domestic violence calls rise over the holidays, and this was true again this year. During the holiday season, while often associated with joy and togetherness, it can also be a time of heightened stress, drug and alcohol use, and financial strain, leading to an alarming rise in domestic violence incidents. Domestic violence does not discriminate. It affects individuals of all ages, genders, backgrounds, socioeconomic status. It's a stark reminder that for many, holidays bring challenges, not celebrations. SPAN provides emergency shelter, advocacy, legal representation, counseling, support groups, and transitional housing. SPAN offers a vital lifeline to individuals and families impacted by abuse. SPAN is that in-between place for those fleeing domestic violence. When we talk about the new year, the in-between, perseverance, and what we hope for, I hope that we can live out our mission to connect bravely, embody justice, and always love those in need, and share with all those affected by domestic violence. Together we can create a new year of safety, compassion, and empowerment for everyone. Thank you.
I invite you to give as generously as you are able. For those online, you can use the QR code or find a link in the video description. For those gathered in person, you can scan the QR code or make a donation as the ushers now pass the baskets. May our gifts be used to enact justice, bringing peace and love to the Boulder community and the wider world.
I'll close with an invitation. If you're new-ish to this community after the service today, I want to invite you to join me, to join Rachel Alba, our Director of Religious Education, Scott Montgomery, our Community and Connection Manager, in the listening room that's just out that back door over there. It's for conversation and connection. We would love to get to know you, to answer any questions that you might have. Before that, we are not travelers and we're not tourists. We are a pilgrim people, not in that weird whitewashed belt buckles on the hat sort of way, but in the way of real pilgrims, the way a person sets out on a journey not knowing quite who they're going to be at the end of it. The way we set out on a journey expecting ourselves to be transformed in the process. Whatever crossroads we come to, we don't do it alone. Amen. Rise, embody your spirit. Let's close in song.